Good morning, everybody. On what we've now gathered is a cold, wet, cloudy day in South Africa, but apparently wonderful weather in the UK. John, so glad we could swap for a day.
Just for a day.
Yeah, you're back to normal tomorrow, please. Good morning, everybody. Welcome so very much to today's webinar. As usual, we get the show on the road. So, what I figured out is that reading a report is easy. There's words and numbers and pictures, thank goodness. But understanding what it means and what to do about it, well, that's a little bit different, and it's where most of us struggle. Okay. So we invited you to this webinar, not where we're going to just present the facts and the stats of the Lupio report, but we're going to look at the why, what does it mean, and what should you do about it. So at the surface, it's a benchmark report on bid volumes and win rates and AI, and bandwidth, all sorts of things. But underneath it, the report is really showing a system that's under pressure. There's more RFPs in the market, and it's consistently increasing over time. More teams are bidding, from SMB right through to enterprise. Considerably more AI adoption, more strain on teams, and yet there are lower advancement and win rates. Now, these are not just once-off or one-year spikes. These are patterns that have been building over time. To talk about this, I'm joined by three very clever people. Now, from across the pond, our good and longtime friend, John Williams, Managing Director of Strategic Proposals, APMP Fellow, and widely recognized for helping organizations improve win rates. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
Also, Deshni Naidu, leading WinWorks executive. Deshni has a very deep experience in bid pursuit. I know that's her jam, improving bid performance. And Deshni is also on the Sub-Saharan Africa, the APMP Sub-Saharan Africa board. Our very own Larissa Cornelius, CEO of nFold, also APMP fellow, and also on the APMP Sub-Saharan Africa board. I'm Izan Hamilton, your host, facilitator, referee if needed today, and general poker of bears. I like to stir a little. So welcome, everyone. Let's jump right in. There's a data point in this report that is easy to miss, but it changes how you should interpret everything else. RFPs influence around 40% of company revenue. That's the highest level since 2019. For top performing teams, this number is even higher. It's closer to 47%. So what I'm reading into this is that it's not just bids and proposals or tenders. This is about serious commercial performance. And if you connect that to the other data points, what we're seeing in the report, like declining win rates and declining advancement, then this is not an operational issue. It's a revenue issue. So my first question is to Larissa. Considering this background, so if RFPs influence around 40% of companies' revenue, what does it mean when win rates and advancement rates are declining?
So as you mentioned, RFPs in the report show, depending on the industry, that they influence between 40 to 48% of a company's revenue. And we often see much higher rates than that in Africa. And we're seeing this increase because buying has become more structured, more competitive, more global, and that really puts pressure on how organizations show up on proposals and pitches. In other words, before you could do a lot of deals without necessarily going through a procurement process, where now we're seeing an increase where procurement is no longer just the gatekeeper for a small portion of the revenue. And it needs to be a critical part of the business sales strategy. As a result, the bid tender function is a key growth engine for businesses. But the real signal is in the decline in the win rates and the advancement rates, right? And in my view, it's not so much a proposal problem, although I think they are those problems, but it really is a decision or a qualification problem, because what the data shows is that companies are chasing more opportunities, which is understandable under economic pressure. We've seen that in 2019, 53% organizations were winning about 53%, which has now declined to an all-time low of 39%. So, and that's been post-COVID. So I think that has really been because things have gotten a little bit more electronic, things have gotten a little bit pressured. So organizations are a little bit more desperate in terms of winning work, but also there's more competition than there ever has been for. So I think that's really important. But what we're seeing is that since 2020, we are also qualifying less or less effectively. So it means we're being less selective about the opportunities that we're pursuing. So volume's going up while win rates are going down.
It's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and more bids doesn't mean more wins. It usually means the opposite. So what's also interesting is, as you mentioned, that we're seeing the highest adoption of AI this year. So AI is definitely increasing, but win rates still dropped. So technology alone is not fixing the challenge.
But yeah, we'll talk more about the AI impact a little bit later, because it is a very interesting data point.
But the positive is that this is solvable. The report is really clear. And what I liked about the report is it shows what top performers are doing. And top performers are far more selective, more strategic, and more disciplined on how they pursue ultimately.
Yeah, true. Let's look at I'm going to say the positive side of it. So, John.
And my cat has just joined at exactly the right moment. So meet Tilly, everybody. She loves joining my calls.
Well, you know what? We all have our dogs somewhere in the room and hoping and praying that they won't bark. But anyway, happy to meet your cat. What does the cat think, John? There's 40% of companies' revenue that is won through bids, proposals, tenders. What does it mean? In your head, what is your interpretation of that?
Look, I think that's exciting, right? I've long argued that the bid and proposal function for organizations is the job protection and creation engine. And actually, if I'm talking to the C-suite, I tend to call it the revenue generation and protection engine, because, not being funny, but they're more interested in numbers than they are in people, right? Who's ever looked around their office and gone, you owe your job to me? You wouldn't be there as a team if I hadn't helped win that bid. Who's ever picked up your company annual report, which describes big and interesting things you're doing as an organization, and gone through with a red pen and circled, but that's because of me, and that's because of me, and that's because of our team, right? Or even a simple one. Here's one you can try. Take your company's organization chart and just circle on it all the people and teams who owe their jobs to delivering projects as a result of the bids you've helped win, right? So we are absolutely a business critical function. The challenge becomes, I'm not always sure that we're treated as a business critical function. I don't think if you go and talk to the chief execs and say, map out the most important functions in the business, not sure bid and proposal management would be top of the list, but it should be, right? Yeah. And so I think that 40% of revenue is fantastic. It shows the importance of what we do. the battle becomes, how do we get the organization to take that into account and treat us with the seriousness they should?
I've always wondered, if it says 40% are due to bids and tenders and etc., where does the other 60% come from? And typically it would be renewals, incumbents, that sort of thing. But where did the incumbent come from? Where did the renewal come from?
Well, exactly.
Somewhere.
And the most successful the most successful bid teams I see are not just these days responding to RFPs. They're very much involved in proactive proposals to upsell and cross-sell, and they're very involved in renewal proposals. So, if you've got an opportunity, a contract that comes up for expiry in 12 months' time, send them a proposal now. Don't wait until it gets on the slippery slope of competitive tendering. So absolutely 100%.
The other thing that, when I read the report, there were a few things that puzzled me. And I think it's the contradictions, or on the surface, it looks like contradictions, because you have to not look at a single data point. You need to look at it in context. So if we look at the following three things as an example, more RFPs in the market. So 68% of teams say they are receiving more RFPs. So the market is busier and more competitive. Secondly, the go, no-go discipline has fluctuated over time, but it has now dropped to 75%. It's the lowest since 2021. The third one here is, if you look at participation over time, so that means a company or a bid team gets bids, but they decide which ones to participate in, the participation rate is also declining. 55% in 2025, when it was 69% in 2019. So over time, teams are responding to a smaller share of what they receive. But in absolute terms, they are still submitting more bids. Now, math has never been my strong point, but it doesn't add up for me. So I'm going to throw this one at Deshni, because I know pursuit is her jam, and I think she'll make the connection here. So, Desh, how would you explain this? More opportunities, less selectivity, but still responding to a smaller share of what's available. What does it mean?
Thanks, Izan. That's a really great question. And I think Clarissa also alluded to it a little bit earlier, right? I think the simple explanation here is that inbound RFP volume is rising faster than the team's ability to respond. So participation will fall as a percentage, even while the total bid submissions rise. So if you really do think about it, it's a capacity story, right? Volume is up, selectivity is uneven, and capacity is constrained. The team is doing more bids, but they're covering less of the market available to them. So they just aren't growing fast enough to keep up. So just like the song said earlier, coffee is not enough to wake the dead. So it's not really a contradiction, right? It's really a signal of constrained capacity and weaker qualification discipline, in my opinion.
But John, how does this show up in teams, day to day, everyday stuff, not just on a report, but in real life?
Well, my starting point is, this is good news, right? The market is busy. If we were sat here going, there'd been a collapse in the volume of RFPs because we were in a global slump, that would worry me more than we're really busy. So despite Donald Trump's best endeavors, we're still in, reasonable economic circumstances around the world, which keeps us busy. If I focus on the bid, no bid stuff, the first thing, it's great that people have a process. I know the numbers have come down a little bit, but when I started talking about this stuff 26, 27 years ago, people didn't know what bid, no bid was.
Yeah.
Right. The fact that 7 out of 10 organizations have got a process in place, wow, that's pretty cool. But I know that we end up sort of bowing to pressure from the sales organization, who want to chase everything that moves. A lot of salespeople are measured on busyness as well as results, what's in their pipeline, never mind what they actually win. So I get that sometimes their metrics drive the wrong behavior. The bid no bid process has to have buy-in from the top of the organization. It has to have buy-in from the CEO, the chief sales officer downwards. It has to have some clear criteria. You know, we've long talked about, is it real? Do we want it? Can we win it? Can we do it? It has to have the mindset that we've long preached, that every deal is qualified out until it's qualified in. You know, you don't chase a deal until you can build a business case to do so. And actually, as bid and proposal people, we need to be tracking data, you know, qualification scores versus outcome. Look, this scored this amount, we lost. This scored a bit higher, and we lost. This scored a bit higher than we lost. Okay, we won that one. This scored higher, we lost, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And you draw a graph, and it all comes to light. The other thing I think I'm seeing is that organizations are getting better at no bidding. So historically, what's happened is the decision is bid, and the cavalry shows up. You know, we all engage and support the salespeople. The decision is no bid, and the salesperson's left on their own to have a really difficult conversation with their clients. And so the top performing bid teams I'm seeing have actually built no bid processes. What's the message we need to communicate? How do we communicate? Who do we communicate? What media do you use for that? I've seen people send in really lovely, you know, almost glossy no bid documents saying, look, we know you wanted in blue today. We don't do blue. We do green. Good luck finding blue. Green would be a fallback if you want, but we know you want it in blue. By the way, we know you want it in pink in 6 months' time. We're really good at pink. Let's start talking. So that might be also part of the dynamic going on here.
You know, we all know, I think everyone on this call knows that proper go, no go is the easiest way to increase your win rate, because time and resources are so limited. Chase what you can win, not what you hope you can win. But one of the other contradictions I've seen, and this sort of links to the AI thing. So AI has surged over the past 2 years. I mean, when we started talking about AI, it was around about 34% of teams were sort of dabbling with it, playing with it. Now it's nearly 80%. We know that bid volumes have increased, and advancement rates are going down. Now, advancement rates, of course, is the percentage of bids that progress to the next stage, shortlisting, finalists, BAFO, those sorts of things. So we've got better tools, more activity, more effort, but again, I want to say worse outcomes. And that shouldn't be happening. Let's first again look at the positives. John, you're such a positive person, and you always remind me we need to look at the positives before we look at the negatives. So what are some of the positives you see for bid teams using AI?
Well, I can probably use my own team as an example. I have a team of my UK team's about 25 bid and proposal managers, writers, designers, and we go away once a year for 3 days. And when we talked about AI at our retreat 3 years ago, it was folded arms and negative body language, and everyone was worried. Now it's like, oh, hey, how can we do this? Oh, I've got a good idea. Oh, this is working. And people have embraced it. And it's actually become just part of the way we work. You don't load up your computer in the morning and think, oh, look, I'm using Word. And these you don't actually get to the point now where you think, well, you don't think I'm using AI. We're just doing it, right? And things have moved, right? Even I remember when APMP first started talking about this, we were talking about prompt engineering. We put lots of effort into how do you prompt things really well, and how do you actually get the system to write in the right tone of voice, and how do you get it to answer the right question? All of that sort of stuff. In a way, we've moved beyond that now. It's all about agentic AI, and frankly, what'll be around the corner in 2 years' time will be very different than what we're seeing now. There's a quote in our most recent research from a professor at Wharton that said, never forget that the AI you're using today is the worst AI you'll ever use. You know, this is moving so quickly. But I'm seeing people getting real benefit from, you know, at the front doing research, the back end doing reviews, and proposal gen AI in the middle, which is the sweet spot. But there are a couple of risks. Can I be negative for once, Cesar? I mean, number one, content is queen here, right? If people are pointing their AI at nonsense, they will get nonsense. Number two, people need training in this. I'm guessing most people on this course who are using AI have taught themselves how to do it. Well, this is a core business skill, and we need people to get proper training in how to do that. And I don't just mean like the APMP AI micro certification, which is very decent, but we need real proper training in this. And the other thing that worries me is lack of control of the sales folks and subject matter experts out there. Because, you know, we as bid and proposal people can get really good at using AI with the right sort of guardrails around it. And I just know that on a bid, when we then turn around to some technical subject matter expert and we've worked out a storyboard and we've worked out a strategy and we want them to write in the right, they're just going to go, Copilot, give me an answer. And so actually, it's not just about how we use it, but it's about educating and controlling the use of it on bids and proposals from people out there in the business. That's the real challenge, I think, that not many people have embraced as well as they might have done yet.
Very, very true. So it is the hallucinations, it's the false facts, and people are getting better at prompt engineering, but we know it's not perfect yet. So Larissa, if we put AI to the side just for a little bit, and we look again at volumes increasing, the pressures, the win rates declining, where do you think the problem originates? Is it before the bid? Is it during the bid? Or is it after, during contracting? Where's the problem originating today?
I think there's a few problems, and I think some of them have already been sort of mentioned, but I would say that first and foremost, it's mostly breaking way before the bid, the tender, the RFP even starts, is even out, right? First and foremost, we're seeing that organizations are going, you know, after bids that they shouldn't, without a real understanding of the customer, the competition, and the value that they, you know, the value that they bring to the process. Why should they win? So by the time they're writing, they're already on the back foot. So as a result, the bid messaging, quantified differentiation already falls short. But for me, that's usually a symptom, not a cause. And after, so that's where it is before. But then after, we also see very few teams do proper post-bid reviews and customer debriefs, right?
Yes.
So the same mistakes just repeat over and over again. So we have this bad cycle happening, yeah? And then I don't want to totally ignore AI because, you know, we can't ignore AI, it's here. But what we are seeing is more AI than ever, but not better results. And like John said, we're seeing a lot of bad usage of AI, particularly from, you know, subject matter experts. And I think that tells us a lot. Most teams are using AI to move faster, not necessarily smarter. And also what we're seeing a lot of is that a lot of people have got this false sense of, okay, I have AI, so now I have domain expertise. You know, I can be an executive summary writer expert without training. And that means the strategy is completely off. Most are just scaling the wrong things. And if you don't have strong bid fundamentals, like John said, what are you actually feeding AI, right? Junk in, junk out. And that's where it gets risky. You lose differentiation and you start sounding like everyone else, because remember, AI is trained on how everyone else pretty much writes. And so the best teams get this. They're not replacing people with AI. They're pairing strong strategy and domain expertise with it. And that's why top performers are still investing in people. And the report shows most teams grew despite the increase of AI, yet 50% of the people in the survey still felt that now they've been given more responsibilities and capacity is a real challenge.
Yeah.
So at least we're not being replaced by AI.
Not everyone. I seem to recall somewhere in the report there was a stat that said 15%. There was some 15% of replacement. But anyway, you mentioned capacity. Now, in the report, it said that 50% of the teams say they don't have enough capacity. Although AI is making us do stuff faster, they don't have enough capacity because the team sizes haven't actually changed. So AI has not given us more time. It has given us, I want to say, more work in a different area, same capacity, lower win rates. And we've spoken so much about the go, no go discipline, which is one of my pet peeves. But Desh, this pressure is increasing. Behavior is changing, but the outcomes are still declining. What is breaking in the system?
So
is
that's
it the
also
capacity? Is it the training? What is breaking?
Yeah, that's a bit of a tough one, but in my opinion, exactly, what Larissa and John has said as well. I mean, AI is giving us kind of a false sense of, we can do this better. We can't do it better, we're just doing it faster. So I think it's the ability to choose well and achieve quality work is what's broken. Because now we're not choosing well because we can do it faster. And of course, we're just putting it into AI and getting it out there. And so it's not quality work, right? So there's more work coming in, there's more competition, but it's the same number of people, but they believe that AI is compensating them. So the system gets stressed. And when that happens, three things do start to break. Number one, the teams stop being careful about which bids to go for. Number two, quality drops because they don't focus on doing the bid properly. And thirdly, the results break because then they lose more often and they get knocked out earlier. So for me, what's breaking is quality under pressure, right? We always were under pressure, but now quality is breaking under pressure. The system is breaking because people have too much to do and not enough time to do it well. They might have enough time to do it, but they don't have enough time to do it well. So for me, it's quality under pressure that's breaking.
Laura, this quality under pressure that is breaking, is it a capacity problem or is it a decision problem?
I was actually, I was sort of thinking a difference about, global versus the African report. And, if you look at the statistics, it looks like globally, it leans more to a qualification problem. But I actually think it is both. And in Africa, it's certainly both, right? So let's just talk a little bit about, and obviously this is based on the RFP trends report that we did in Africa last year. But first and foremost, in Africa, we have significantly smaller teams, so 5 versus the average of 8 internationally. We have low adoption of proposal automation teams. So last year in Africa, we had a 10% adoption versus 65% adoption globally. We have less formal qualification processes. We have higher manual processes, so we're not quite as portal-based as our international counterparts yet. And we have much slower AI uptake. So but we're still responding to the same volume of bids. And that creates real capacity and quality pressure. And because I think we've spoken a lot about the global one. But so if you don't have the capacity, you have to be more selective. But that's not what we're seeing happening. In fact, globally, we're seeing everyone's just responding to more because we're desperate. And also the reality is the more you win, the more you need to win, right? So the result ends up being spreading the team too thin and, like Deshni said, compromising quality. And that's why the win rates, I actually reckon, are a lot lower in Africa than the global report, right? But the bigger issue actually sits underneath that. So as much as I'm saying it's, is it a capacity or decision problem? Yes, but it's not just a proposal tender problem. It's a business development or win performance system problem. Too often, the bid function, and John mentioned this, is brought in too late because they treat it as an admin center instead of a revenue growth center for the organization. And instead of being integrated into the full, the full sales and pursuit life cycle, that's the problem. So they align, and that's where top performers are different, right? They align sales strategy and bid teams early. They make better decisions because their system supports better decisions. And so, yes, capacity matters. And I think that it's far more severe in Africa, but I think it still exists globally. And how you design your system, your processes, enable and educate. I think that's important, your team, not just your bid team, but the winning stakeholder team, like John mentioned. The leaner you are, the more selective you need to be. Otherwise, what's happening is you're just wasting time and money on a losing game. Yeah.
I think what AI has really helped us do, and where so much focus has been in the last couple of years, is on improving the proposal, articulating win themes, the value proposition, how to properly structure it. That's important. We know that's important. But what's coming out in this conversation, and what I'm reading between the lines in the report, is that the problem is no longer the proposal. It's much higher up the value chain. So, John, I think organizations are not necessarily focusing on the right part in this value chain. I think they should be focusing higher up the value chain. What are your thoughts on this? Are they focusing on the wrong problem, trying to fix something that's not broken, while ignoring where we should be focusing now? What's your thoughts?
Well, let me couch that in terms of a shift we're seeing in the market for bid and proposal teams, which is shift left, shift right. So the shift left is much earlier engagement in the process. If you don't understand what your organization's top 10 must-win deals are for the rest of the year, you're not closely aligned enough to the pipeline. If you don't understand what your organization's top 10 must-retain contracts are at the back end of this year or into 2027, you're not closely enough aligned to the pipeline. So we're seeing a lot more. We've been talking for years about pre-proposal planning and capture. We're seeing that happening much more rigorously and routinely in the teams with the highest success rates out there. So that's become kind of part of the discipline. But you've got to know what to do when your salesperson calls you up and says, look, I've got a contract coming up for renewal in January next year. Can we write a renewal proposal? You've got to know what to do with it. And you've got to know how to do that, as well as talking the talk of this is something that might happen. So there's some skills and disciplines going on in there. And I think that in the age of AI, when proposal gen AI is letting us churn out documents, capture pre-proposal planning, the human interface, is giving us competitive advantage. It's helping us work out what we get AI to do. And I put in the chat, human intelligence plus artificial intelligence is always going to be greater than artificial intelligence. The shift right piece, and I don't know if you're seeing this in Africa, but certainly one of the things we're also seeing is that procurement teams are putting a lot more emphasis on the face-to-face presentation, or even a presentation over Teams after the proposal's been submitted. And that's happening much quicker. So previously, you'd send the proposal in, and a few weeks later, they ask, could you present that to us? And now those weeks have become days. Now those sessions have become much more demanding. It's not just give us some slides, give with an overview. It's interview based, it's scenario based. It's when they're really getting to see the people, because the proposal's just generated by AI, right? But people are three-dimensional and can't be AI generated yet. That's 20 years down the line, right? So buyers are putting a lot more emphasis on that, a lot more weighting on that. And so shift left getting involved earlier in the process, but shift right, the most successful bid people really need to start thinking about behaving like presentation coaches, pitch coaches. And then how do we script that? How do we rehearse that? What collateral do we produce? And doing that really, really quickly, and perhaps in parallel with writing the proposal. So shift left, shift right is, I think, perhaps my answer to your question.
We've seen both in our clients that we work with. I would love some of our clients to know which are the top 10 opportunities they want to win this year, because it's very much look, an RFP. Look, another RFP. Let's set it up. And it creates chaos in the bid team, who's trying to be structured, focused, organized, deliberate. Never mind the 10 they want to retain. The other part that we're seeing, and it's really where the clients have bought in, the results are magic. As we prepare the proposal, we already start preparing the presentation in conjunction with that. We already think, what are we going to say? Who's going to say it? How are they going to say it? And the ones that take the rehearsals serious, their jaws drop when they get feedback from their clients. But the ones that go, we'll wing it, we know our stuff, they're surprised when they don't win it. So we see both sides. And that leads me to the top performers part of our conversation, because strategic proposals, I've been nudging when we get the next How the Best Win report, because I absolutely love that report, because it really looks at the ones that win more often, probably more than what would be considered their fair share, the top performers. What do they do differently? I guess people would want to mimic that, at least understand it and mimic it. So if we look at what the report says, there's a clear difference with top performing teams. They are more likely to not only have a structured go, no go process, but to use it. Having it is not enough. You need to actually use it. They continuously improve their processes. Was it Larissa that talked about, or Deshi that talked about post-bid reviews, happening, not happening? But the top performers take that and they feed it back into the system. And the third thing that these top performers do is they actually invest more in their teams. And that's why they are likely to influence a larger share of the revenue, closer to 47% versus the average 40%. Now, that isn't just a marginal difference. It is significant. Dish. If this model for better performance or top performers are visible, why isn't it more widely adopted in practice?
I'll tell you why. Because best practice is easy to describe, but it's really hard to operationalize under pressure. And from what we're seeing, teams are under pressure, right? Most teams know that a structured go-no and continuous improvement and team investment all matter, right? The problem is that when the volume is high, capacity is tight, and deadlines are just constant. And then organizations just default to a short-term survival, right? They protect throughput instead of discipline. They protect activity instead of reflecting the post-bid reviews. And they also protect delivery today instead of capability building for tomorrow, which is so important. So in simpler terms, there's two things that usually get in the way, right? It's the pressure. They're too busy to step back and change how they work. And culture. It's really important to understand culture. Many organizations reward chasing more bids and not being more selective and not improving the system. That's actually a culture. And so even when the model is visible, right, adoption lags because it requires time, investment, leadership discipline, the very things that are really hardest to sustain in a high-pressured environment. So the model might be visible, but adoption is uneven because it asks them to do something difficult, which is slow down, qualify harder, invest in capability, and continuously improve. While the market is just screaming louder, teams are already stretched. And in practice, many teams fall back to reactive behavior. So I think they admire the model, but they struggle to embed it. In other words, I think the barrier is not awareness. I think it's execution under pressure.
Yeah, I suppose it makes sense because it is the pressure. It's economic pressure, doing more with less, that whole thing. But John, what helps organizations, or let me rephrase this. Deshi explained what the problem is. How do we help organizations overcome this? How do we help them to operate the way that these top performers do?
And we have to get as a starting point, we have to get our organizations to take this stuff seriously.
Mm.
If we're fighting the battle from underneath and we're pushing and pushing, we can only go so far. And at some point, there has to be a reset in the company that goes, right, this is critical to our future success. And therefore, we need to resource it properly. We need to train people properly. We need the right tools to do this. We need the right capacity to do this. And we need to celebrate success. Because most CEOs just think proposal function, or they just produce a few documents. That can't be difficult. And actually, it's about changing that agenda to, you know what, this is that business critical function we talked about. This is your engine of growth for the organization. And I remember having a chief exec, very big IT company a few years ago, someone I've known quite well. And he phoned me up on the first day of his job as a chief exec of a new company. And he said, John, I need your help. But I don't need your help yet. I've got a year where I can do lots of low-hanging fruit of cutting costs and make myself a hero. But your expertise is then going to win us business and make me a hero in year 2. And it's about how do we make the CEO be a hero? And there are ways of doing that, right? And the way we've always done that in the past, two very quick and easy ways of doing it. One is just train people, right? Teach people what good looks like and create that sort of groundswell of support for doing it in the right way. The other is actually benchmarking, which is to take that objective view of what are we doing today? What does good practice look like? Where are the gaps? And that gives you the ability to have a more strategic conversation in the boardroom that says, look, there's some things we're not doing here that could give us advantage. Third one I'd throw in, which is the new one, is that the arrival of AI gives us an excuse. It gives us a compelling event to say, look, we need to embrace this. We need to think how to do it. As we do that, how do we do that strategically? And what does that mean for our resources? So riding some sort of benchmarking or change process off, how to exploit AI, I've seen a couple of people doing very successfully.
Those are practical things. I like to theorize and debate, but I think it's very important that we get to the practical stuff as well. So Larissa, 2 things practically that you would suggest we help organizations do to become more top performer like.
Sure. Look, I mean, 100% agree with John, but it's not surprising because John's always been such a mentor to me. So I think we think quite alike.
Thank you.
I think it always starts with how you choose opportunities, how you position early, and then how you use customer and competitor intelligence, and then obviously aligning the teams across the full pursuit life cycle, right? I think the real problem is too often the bid team is brought in late and expected to fix it, but by then the outcome's actually largely set. And I think that's where organizations are missing it, right? And we were talking about top performers, right? They engineer how they win. And like John said, I think benchmarking and training is absolutely critical, but, it's also about having a clear process, define roles, and I mean the full business development process and how they integrate into each other. And of course, empowering decision-making. I think the biggest problem is because the bid function is treated as this admin afterthought that they're not empowered. They're the best empowered to be doing a bid validation decision, to test or play devil's advocate when opportunities come in. And, that should be done throughout that process. So I think the real integration between sales and bid teams is really, really important. And I think what's key is what we're seeing in the report, and this is very contrasting to what we're seeing in general in Africa. I'm saying in general because there are a lot of organizations that are aligned, but they have bigger teams, they have more tools, they have embedded processes, and very important executive buy-in. I strongly believe that executives often create the bad sales behavior, and it's about building a proper winning culture. And that means that it's not just about the process and the systems, it's really how people buy into the systems, So really, if you're losing more than you're winning, you have a win performance issue. And those small differences can make a huge difference on revenue growth.
So Izan, sorry,
Yeah,
do you mind if I just step in there? Because what Laura said now about executive buy-in, right? And we're talking about the practicality of how do we actually become like the top performers. The first step for me, in my experience in Pursuit, is the executives need to understand, it's got nothing to do with bid processes and the bid team and capacity right now. Executives need to understand who are their key customers and what are we selling to them? Because if they know that, then qualification becomes easier. We go for less of opportunities, no matter what size our team is, no matter how much AI we have, no matter what great bid processes we have. But we need to have that executive alignment, like Larissa said, yes. Understand who your key customers are and what are you selling to them. Then everything else, your sales, business development, and bid will align.
It sounds so simple. And on the one hand, it is, but again, people don't do it. So before we close and take some questions, when I look at the report, there are 3 very big positives that stand out for me. Okay. The first one is that RFPs matter more than ever. It is the highest number of company revenue that it influences now. We've said it, 40%, up to 47% of the top performers. The second positive here is that capability has improved dramatically. And by that I mean AI adoption, AI use, proper use. Yes, it varies, it fluctuates, but nearly 80% of teams now use it. So teams can do more than they could before. And the third thing, and this is really important, it's what we've been talking about now, is we know what good looks like. Top performing teams are consistently more selective, more structured, and more deliberate in how they operate. So I don't think that the gap is knowledge. If you've got an internet connection and a laptop, you can get access to information. The gap is that execution, is knowing what to do and then doing it. So I think when we step back from everything here, and look, we could talk about this for days because it really is fascinating. But when we step back from the more bids and more tools and more effort, the question really isn't about writing better proposals. It's about understanding how we win and why we win. Because investing the time and the effort, etc., why would we want to do that in opportunities we are never going to win? So, question to John. Do you really think that organizations understand why they win?
Well, I would turn that around to people on the call. When did you last spend time with procurement people? Right? When did you last spend time with your internal procurement people, with customers' procurement people, understanding their decision-making processes? And that could be just a personal development thing, well away from the heat of the battle of an individual bid. Or it could be the thing Larissa said earlier, this idea of kind of lessons learned, learning reviews, so fundamental, debriefs, so fundamental, win-loss programs. You go and ask for feedback from a customer soon after they've made a decision. All they want to do is get you out of the door without having an argument. So pick a sample of them once a quarter, go and survey them and say, what's going on? So I'm not actually sure we do understand how to win, because I'm not sure we understand the people taking the decisions well enough. And I started my career in procurement, and I keep coming back to it's that empathy with the people taking decisions. And if we understand what good looks like for them, and then we run a process and write a document that appeals to that, then we're going to win. And if we don't, you know what? We're going to lose. Can I add a fourth thing, by the way, a good thing out of all of this?
Yeah.
And this is a brilliant example of people in the bid and proposal profession giving back. So the amount of work that Lupio put into producing this report completely unpaid on behalf of the profession, is phenomenal. Right, it is an amazing report, and we should give thanks to them for doing that. The stuff you put in here, hosting this, Friendful, it's an example of giving back. We're nice people in this profession, right? We like to do things that give back, but it really is a phenomenal piece of work. And I really would say to people, don't just read it and then work out what are the 3 things in here that means we need to do differently, and what are the data points in here I need to use to help win these battles internally. And then it becomes immensely powerful.
I think that's excellent advice. Thank you so much, John. So immediately putting Larissa and Deshni on the spot, what are the 3 things in the report that you think people should do immediately to turn this around? I'll start with Desh.
Okay, so I would say, just understand your qualification framework a lot better. Just make sure you put more effort and discipline into that, because without clarity on which ones you can truly win, that's when performance starts to leak. So I would focus on the go, no-go framework. Put your effort in there, and just make sure that you're understanding how you are competing, right? Because, the real risk is not writing a weak bid. The real risk is writing a brilliant bid for the wrong opportunity. So you absolutely need to understand that first.
Thanks, Desh. That's very good. Brilliant proposal for the wrong opportunity. Laura, what do you think? What is that one thing that people can literally do tomorrow to close that gap between where they are and where top performers are?
Well, I think I've already alluded to winning isn't luck, it's engineered. And too often we try to engineer it at proposal stage versus looking at the overall business development process. But I think I want to take a quote from John's book, Proposal Essentials, which is the quickest way to improve your win rate is to stop bidding on opportunities where you have a low probability of winning. And the report is showing on average businesses are doing the opposite. And I think the stats are clear. And and an additional report I love is the one from John's team from Strategic Proposals, How the Best Wins, is there's a direct correlation between the tender and proposal function maturity and win rates. So if we do what John has proposed and we are educating our teams, we are investing, because I think there's a lack of investment in the bid function, and we're investing more into that process, then we're investing in winning.
Thank you very much. We have about 5 minutes left. If there's anybody who wants to ask a specific question to Deshni, Laura, or John, you're very welcome to. While you think about your question, I will do the thanks. John, thank you so much for joining us. It's always so lovely to see you, even if it is so far and on Teams. By the way, John was the one who did the APMP Foundation certification to both Larissa and myself. So, that's how long this journey has been
all those
going.
years ago, right?
Oh my goodness. John, thanks so much. Deshni, thank you very much. Your insights, your articulation, being so succinct in how we articulate the problem, what to do, always lovely. Laura, thank you so much.
Welcome.
You and I have been walking a long journey in this bid and proposal industry, and I'm never surprised at your insight. So thank you very much. I'm not sure if any questions has come through. Otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, the recording will be on our YouTube channel in a day or two.
Sally did have a question I see in the chat. So, maybe John, you can talk to this. Is she said for her a bigger item impacting proposals is shorter turnaround times. Any thoughts? I think the report definitely confirms that.
Yeah. And that's where you do need a really nimble process, and that's where AI can help. But that's also where, if you know about the opportunity in advance, you can expand that response window, because they never give us long enough to respond, right? So the more you can do up front, Because I'd argue that most RFPs, you can predict 80% of the content of what they're going to ask you before you see the RFP, right?
Mhm.
So the more you can do up front, the better. But then a really slick engine in terms of how you engage, how you run the process, access to the right pre-written content in there, because knowledge management hasn't gone away in the age of AI. It's become even more important. And then if you can use some good AI tools to speed things up, we're seeing some real productivity improvements from that as well.
I think that's where your content library, or your knowledge library, your templates, your pre-written content that you know, that's where the benefit of that just shines.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. This is concluding our webinar for today. Really appreciate your time. Have a fantastic Wednesday. Take care.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
bidding.
Great job, Izan. Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.